of what we are trying to find will be in a string. Oh, someone started recording. Okay. And the key of what we are trying to find will be in a string. And this gives us the value of this property in our object. Let's look at that now. So we have, you can see it still works the same way, and it gives us the object. So we have John. So these are the two ways of accessing. These are the two ways of accessing properties in our objects. And this is called the brackets. This is the bracket notation method. And if we also want to get, if we want to call this method full name, we can also do this and call full name. Now, because full name is a function, who can tell me what I'm supposed to do? What do we do for functions? We call the function, because if we do this, what do you think will happen? Without the brackets, what do you think will happen? It just returns, it just tells you that it's a function, and it tells you that the name of the function is what? Is full name. But it doesn't really call the function, and it doesn't do what the function is supposed to do because the function is not getting called. But if we call the function now, then we can access the value in our function block. And what does that do? That returns first name, and it concatenates first name and last name together for us, and that's why we have John Doe. So those are the methods of accessing object properties. Am I too fast? Am I too fast? Please, let's unmute.
No.
Okay, thank you. Next thing, let's talk about the ways of modifying properties in an object. How do we modify properties in an object? We simply add a new value. For example, what does that mean? Let's just do this. If, for example, here we have our object person, and person dot first name in our object is what? Is John, right? We can come here and change the value of the first name in our object and call the person, let me use Jane. Let me use Tunde, for example. So now we can change the first name to Tunde and change the last name to, let me look for one Tunde to use. He has left the call. I think his surname is, he has dropped off. Let me use Steven. Chisimdi Steven. So let's say we want to use Steven's name now. I want to change the last name to Steven. So now in this object, so when we try to access this object now, we are going to see that the values of last name, the values of the first name and last name have been modified by these two lines of code that we did here. So now when we call person, we can see that first name now is now Chisimdi and the last name is now Steven, right? So that's how to modify values in an object. And we can also add. Now what we did was modifying. We changed. Modify simply means to change the value of a value in your objects. So now what we can add a new value. Let's say we want to add a new value called gender, which we didn't have before. So let's say Steven is male, right? So now if we can see that in our initial objects, there's no gender. But now when we call when we keep saying call, when we console person at this point, we will see that it's going to have what? Gender. Because now we've added the new property to our object called, the property is called gender, and the value of the property is what? Is male. So that's why we now have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We now have 5 properties in 5, not 5 properties. We have 4 properties and 1 method in our objects. Meanwhile, in the originally defined object, we had just what? 3 properties. But because we added gender here, we now have 4. So that's how to add and modify properties in your object. Next thing, deleting properties. Let's just, okay, let me make this a new topic. So deleting is very straightforward. To delete, let's say here now, I want to delete the age. Okay, we added gender, last name, first name. Let's delete the gender and let's delete the first name. So we should have just, so we are expecting to have what? Expecting to have just the last name, the age, this full name. Let's delete the full name as well. Now, let's see what we have left. So we have just the last name and the age. So deleting properties in object is very straightforward. All you have to do is just delete your object, the object you want to delete, and the object you are referencing, and the key of the value you want to delete, or the key you want to delete from your object, from your property you want to delete from your object, which is person or first name here, person or full name here, person or gender here, and that deletes these properties from our objects, and we have just last name and age left. You can also have nested properties. Let me put this in the notes for us there. I can also have something, there's also something called nested properties, and it simply means objects within objects. Assessing nested objects, and this simply means an object that has other objects within it. Let's come here. So now we have our object called company. It has a name and it has employees, but employees is now another object that has what? That has employee as a key, and that key is now another object that has the data of that particular employee, which is, so it has the name and the age of the employee. And also we have employee 2, which also has the name, the age, and yep. And now if you want to access the age of employee 1, what do we do? All we have to do is, using dot notation, I've already explained the 2 methods we can use. We can use either dot notation or bracket notation. So using dot notation, this will be company dot employees dot employee 1 dot the name. So this gives us the name of employee 1. And to get the name of employee 2, all we have to do is the same thing, dot employee 2 dot name. And this gives us the name of the employee 2. So now we can see the name. The name of employee 1 is what? John. And the name of employee 2 is what? Jane. So this is using dot notation. And if we want to use bracket notation, all we have to do is what? Define the open your brackets, Now, when you open your brackets, what do? What value are you trying to access? Employees, right? So you put employees in a string within your brackets. Then what's the next thing? Now we are at this point, employees. What's the next thing we want to access? We want to access employee one. So what do? Now we go to employee one, and we need the name of employee one. What do we do again? Another bracket to get the name of employee one. And this gives us what? John. So we can see we can either use the dot notation or the bracket notation. I don't need writing that again. So both of them give us the value. So you can either use both methods to access the value in your objects. Now let's talk about methods in objects. I mentioned it earlier that methods are basically functions defined within functions defined in your objects. Now let's look at a method here. When you look at this person object that we had earlier, we can see that full name is a method. I already explained this, so no need spending so much time on this. Full name is a method. Why? Because it's a function that when you call, it does something. The function could be doing anything. So it basically tells you that, okay, this guy is a function, and when I call this function, something happens. It does whatever it is within the function block, or something just happens. So that tells us that this is a function. Now let's do this. Let's call this function real quick. So let's say we want to access full name. Okay, we even did this earlier. So to access full name, for example, we are telling this function that we define the method called full name, and what does the method do? It's a function that returns. It gets the this here. Now let me explain. The this here basically tells your object that this value is within the context of this object. So what it does is it tells you that this first name is associated with this object. So it just has to get the value of this first name from the context of this object. And same as the last name, it tells you that the last name is in the context of this object. Now let's do something. Let's say let's call it something random. What do you think will happen if we try to access full name? What do you think will happen? Undefined, because SH is not defined in the context of this object. So this object has nothing. This object has nothing to doesn't know what this key is. So it has no way of accessing it. And now let's even do something. Let's look at let's do something. Let's look at this, and let's see what this returns to us. Okay, this is what I was trying to even point out to us. So now when you look at this highlights here now, we can see that this is an object that has all the keys defined within this object. So we can see that our first name is here, our last name is here, our age is here, our full name is also in here. So basically it contains, it's just a prototype that contains all the values, all the what do I call this? All the properties and methods defined within this object. So that's what this references. I hope I was able to explain that to us and we are not confused. If you have any question, please, you are free to unmute and ask me a question.
Sir?
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Without using this, will it still work?
No, it will not work.
Okay.
Because it doesn't know what first name is and it doesn't know what SSH is. Let's look at that together. Can you see it didn't work? So it won't work without using this because within this object, it doesn't know what first name is and it doesn't know what, let me return this back to, it doesn't know what last name is. So the only way to access the properties in this object is to use this keyword. This is a JavaScript keyword. Let's look at something together. Okay. So can we see something here now? This keyword refers to the context where a piece of code, such as a function's body, is supposed to run. Most typically, this is used in object methods where this refers to the object that the method is attached to. The value of this in JavaScript depends on how a function is invoked, blah, 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 not how it's defined. When a regular function is invoked as a method of an object, this points to that object. When invoked as a standalone object, as a standalone function, not attached to an object, func, this typically refers to the global object. I think we should touch on this when we do object-oriented programming. I think there should be a part where I explain this further in object-oriented programming. But you can always all you have to do is come to MDN Web Docs. If you want to understand this more, just come to MDN. You can just Google it, come to MDN Web Docs. This is like an encyclopedia for JavaScript, and you can read more on it. What's our time? 7:33. So we can see now that we have here's our console. Okay. So now we can see now that we have this here. So now we can see that when we remove the this, it doesn't know what last name is. So what does it say? Reference error. Last name is not defined. So the only way you can know what this is within this, because this is defined within the context of this object, you can only reference, because last name is defined within the context of this object, you can only reference it with this keyword in JavaScript. So what else? I think we've touched on methods. Yes, so we know what methods are now. We know how to call object methods. We've done this already. I've explained this already as well. Calling object methods. Let's do something called constructor functions and prototypes. Let me copy this code. So what does this mean? A constructor function is basically used to create multiple. Let me type this here. Can we still see my screen? I'm still sharing, right? Okay. So a constructor constructor function is used to create multiple instances of objects. So what does this mean? Let's go to our JavaScript environment. Don't want to delete everything we have here, but it's getting really long. Let me just comment out this console. Hope you don't have any console here anymore. Okay. So now what does this mean? This we've defined person somewhere already. Okay, this is the person function, so it's not defined anyway. So now we can easily use so now let's say we have a constructor function called person. So person, and what does this person do? I've explained. Please, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you can just signify, because I've explained some of these things before. It takes um two arguments, called what? First name and last name. And what does it do to those arguments? Now it stores them within the context of this object. So this simply, what it simply means is this first name that is coming from, that is getting passed to my function. I want to take that first name and store it in my object. And now what I'm basically going to do is give it to this this is basically the context of this object. So I'm just going to pass it to this and tell this that, okay, oh, this key is called first name, and that way I can use it. I can now use it anywhere. So now what we did here is we took the first name argument, passed it to the disk, our disk keyword, our context manager for this object, which is the disk. Same thing as the last name, we passed it to this as well. And now our function simply, our method rather, simply, which is a function, simply returns a concatenation of the first name and the last name, and we pass that to the this keyword as well. So now we can easily, so now because we've stored the first name and the last name with this keyword, we can easily reference it here in our function for concatenating the person's full name. So now what this simply does is it goes to this context and checks for last name, adds space, goes to the context again and checks for first name rather, and checks for last name, and adds them to concatenates them together into this full name. So now if we want to do something, let's say we want to call someone employee now, we can easily come here and say, and now get this employee, let's say this thing is called employee full name. We can easily come here now and get the person's full name by referencing what? By referencing full name. Now that's the beauty of that, of the this keyword rather. And now when we want to define a new instance or create a new instance of person, we simply use the new keyword in JavaScript. So what this new basically does is it creates a new instance of this person function constructor, and it takes two arguments. Let's change this to, let me look for someone's name to use. Rukayat.
Sir, we can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen?
It's your network,
We
ma'am.
can't see your screen, sir.
Okay.
I think it's your network.
Okay, other people can see it, Abby?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to leave and join back, Rukayat? Might be your network.
I'm seeing now.
Oh, okay. Zachary. Yeah. Okay. So now let's say we want to create a new instance of this person constructor, and the person's full name, person's first name and last name is what? Rukayat Zachariah. So now, and we pass it to we pass it to a variable called Rukayat. So whenever we use Rukayat now, we can now get Rukayat's first name. We can easily access different methods under Rukayat, like can easily get Rukayat's first name, we can get our last name, we can get our full name, we can get whatever property was defined within this object, can easily be gotten from, and the beauty of this is we can also reuse this person constructor for someone else. So let's say we want to use the same person constructor for who else should we use? I've used Steve. Abdulafiz Badmos. So let's say this person now is called Abdulafiz. So now we can simply Badmos. So now we can easily define a new person constructor. You can easily instantiate a new person constructor again and give it the same, so give it its own first name and last name, and all of the properties and methods within this particular function constructor is available to both of them. So for example, now Abdulafiz also can access his first name, he can access his last name, can access his employee full name. And we can also do something called okay, don't let me, yeah, okay, that's the next thing we are talking on. Yeah, there's also something called object prototypes. So now, what are object prototypes? Object prototypes are, okay, first of all JavaScript objects have a prototype, and a prototype is simply an object also. And all JavaScript objects inherit their properties and methods from their prototype. So the prototype is basically a shared property and method among all instances of a constructor function. What does this mean? That looks like plenty English. Let's say we have this first name and this last name. Now I want to add a new key into a prototype object that will be shared across everybody. What does that mean? I can simply do Rukaya dot, let's say Rukaya dot prototype dot, let me call this key Digital Onboarders or CDS. CDS equals no, let me call it CDS states equals, so let's just assume, I don't know the states you guys are having, but let's just assume both Rukayat and Abdulafiz Badmos are serving in the same state. Now this particular prototype can be accessed by now we've defined a CDS state in the prototype of our object. So now if we come to Abdulafiz and we try to access prototype dot CDS state, we defined, I don't want us to get confused. If you look at this, we defined the prototype on Rukayat, right? On this Rukayat instance. But now, then we created a new Abdulafiz instance, and we are trying to access CDS state on this prototype on Abdulafiz instance. What do you think will happen? Did I spell something wrongly? Cancel properties of undefined setting CDS state. Why is it undefined? Let me see. Okay, sorry. It should be .cds state rather. That was a mistake from me. I thought I already. Okay, let me. What is this? Let me call this something else then. Rukayat dot. Ah, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. I meant to define the prototype on this on this person instance for it to be shared across everybody. So now let's say the person of prototype is equal to person of prototype does CDS state equals Castina state. So now this state, this CDS state now is a property that will be available as if we defined it here, and it will have a value of what? Of Castina state. And this will be shared across every instance of this person constructor. So now we can access Abdulhafiz.cds state. It says Casina state, and also we can access the CDS state on Rukayat as well. So now we can see something. You can see that when we console just Rukayat, we don't see CDS state on it, right? But when we access now, because prototype is a different object entirely and is not on this. How do I now? Basically, what prototype does is for every instance of a function constructor, every instance of that constructor inherits properties and methods from that prototype. So this prototype is basically another object within. Let me console prototype so we can see what happens in there. I think we should be able to see our CDS state because we already assigned it there. So now we can see that in our prototype, we have CDS state. So this prototype is another object itself that all of these other instances rather inherit from. So anywhere we try to access any of these properties or methods, what they do is they inherit whatever properties are in the prototype and also use it. So they also have access to whatever is defined in the prototype. Please, I hope it's clear and we are not confused. I've closed the console. So now we can see that we have so now we define our prototype Casina states, and that is basically shared across everybody. So now Rukayat has access to the CDS state that we defined in the prototype, and Abdulhafiz also has access to the CDS state that we defined in the prototype. So they both have access to it. So I think I've tried to explain what prototype is there. What else?
Sir, please.
Okay.
This instance is it the same thing as constructor?
The constructor is the instance is what you get when you call the constructor. This person is a constructor. Do you get? When you, for example, now when you over on this, can you see this person is a constructor? You can see constructor person. That's the constructor. But now when you use the new keyword, so now when you use the new when I use the new keyword simply means I'm creating a copy. I'm creating a copy of this person constructor. What is this one again? Out of sync. Reset to mine. So I'm creating a new copy of this person constructor, and this copy or instance has access to all of the properties that were defined in this person constructor. I don't know if you understand. If it's let me see if there's a better explanation out there. Instance of a constructor. JavaScript. Let me to. Well, I think you can just come to MDN. I don't want to spend time looking for. Let me see. So when you use the new keyword, let me see where they defined it. Concern the constructor, blah 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 blah. Aha. It's not change. I can't find a straightforward way where a simple way they define this thing. Can someone please mute yourself? Okay, thank you. I was hearing myself back. Can't find any explanation to back up what we just did. But basically, let me just explain again. This person itself is a constructor function that has all of the properties that were defined. And now this instance is basically a copy. How do we let me be sure I'm using the right, it doesn't have a different name. See. So okay. Okay. So I'm trying to look for a better explanation for this. I can get something that will be clearer. Aha. Okay. So, okay. So basically, what they said is this just creates this just creates a new instance. I think that's just the best explanation I can give for it. It just creates a new instance of this person constructor object, and that's just couldn't find a better explanation. So, and that's just I think it's pretty straightforward, and that's just this Rukayat and Abdulhafiz that we have here.
Sir, sorry for interrupting you, sir.
Okay.
If I get you right, this let Rukayat equal to new person is an instance.
Yes.
Let Abdulhafiz equal to new person is also an instance
of this constructor object. Yes. So this is basically a new object.
But how do you now create a constructor? And how do you initialize a constructor? That is what I want to get clearly.
With this new keyword. Do you understand?
Okay, so that is you are doing two things at the same time, creating a constructor and then creating an instance.
So hold on. So basically, what this new keyword does is this new keyword tells JavaScript that this person object, I want a copy of that object, which is the instance, which is what I'm calling instance. So it basically creates a new object from this person object. And now this Rukayat object now has all the properties of this person constructor object. Is it clear? Have I answered your question?
So I mean, I'm still confused with the constructor of a thing. I understand the instance well.
Okay.
But it's the constructor that I'm not too clear with.
Let me look for a best way to explain it. Let me see. Constructors in JavaScript. So it's the constructor part. Okay, so what's the constructor? Let's go to the definition. A constructor method is a special method for creating and initializing an object instance of that class. We've not done classes yet, so just tell yourself that the constructor method is a special method of a function for creating and initializing an object instance of that function. According to MDN, this is what they defined a constructor method to be. So what this basically does is so now with this new keyword, let me see if I can get the definition of new in JavaScript. Get somewhere now. This is what so you can see what I'm looking for. So now we can see the two things that we're doing here. So first of all, this new keyword here, what is that word? The new keyword is an operator that lets developers do what? Create an instance of a user-defined object type or built-in object types that has a constructor function. So what it simply means is this new keyword is what gives us is what enables us to be able to do or create an instance of this person constructor. So now all of the properties that were in this person constructor, which are the first name and last name, they are now accessible to this particular instance that we just created. Do you understand? So the first thing it does is it checks that this new keyword, this person is a constructor, fine. Now, to create an instance of this constructor, we use this new keyword. So the two things we are using are this new keyword and the person constructor that we've defined, which is this object here. So now what this does is it initializes an instance based on the constructor function that we defined. Look at that. Is it clear?
Thank you, sir. I will read more on it, sir.
You read more on it. Hey. I think you can just read more on it. I honestly don't know how to explain this more than you know what you would do? What you should do is you see what I just did first of all. Go online. At least these definitions, you know what this new definition, this is it. Read this. This person, this constructor, understand what a constructor does. They now understand what the new keyword of a constructor does. You understand that this gives you an instance. I can also look for references that probably explain better if that would help. I can look for examples. Hey, our time is up. Our time is up. It's 8 o'clock already. Let's just do the next. Let's do for the next 15 minutes and see if we can touch one or two things. Let me move these guys to the notes. You know what? The best reference you can use is this MDN. So if you are reading something that you don't understand, just Google it and just come to this MDN web docs and read more on it. It's basically like the encyclopedia for JavaScript, and that would really help. What's the next thing? Okay. We still have so much to do on objects. Okay, I think we can just finish objects today. So basically, we have something called JSON, which is basically JavaScript's object notation. So JSON is pretty much JavaScript object notation, and this is a lightweight data interchange format. So what this basically means is, for example, on the web, when we send data over, they are sent in JSON format. For example, now let's do something. Not my mail. It's google.com. I want to go to. So now we can see new in JavaScript. So now we can see this response that we got back from Google. This is in a JSON. This is in a JSON format. I'm trying to. This is in a JSON format. So let me spend time on this. This is in a JSON format. So basically, JSON is used for sending data across the internet. That's from your servers. So I can remember I explained this in our first class, how we transfer data over the internet. When I explained TCP IP protocols, I think. Yep, I must have mentioned it there. So it's basically a lightweight data interchange format. That's JSON. And what it simply means, simple method of transferring data. And an example is simply this objects that we've been talking about since morning. So simply in this format. So for example, this is a JSON example, and it basically has all of our key values. And this is how data is transferred over the internet on what is it called? I'm trying to find this. On REST, basically on using REST protocol. So what else? What else I was trying to find something. Iterating over objects properties. Yeah, that's what I've been looking for. So now, how do we iterate over object properties? I know when we did list, if you can remember, we were doing things like map to loop through lists, and access the properties in a list. So now we can do the same thing over objects as well, using a different method called using for let key in person or for const. Let's do something. So let's say we have an object. Let me define a new object called let me define a new object called person. We've called person at the top already. Okay, so let's just define. Let me use one of the ones that we've defined previously. So let's use company. So now let's say we want to loop through this company objects that we defined at the top. Don't want to change the name. So what we can simply do is do for let key or for let key in company. So what this simply means is for each key in what it means is for each key in this company object. So for each key, you can use const or key, doesn't matter. So for each key in this company object, I want to do something with the key. So let's say, for example, I want to log the key. I want to console log the key. So what this will do is this will return to me name and employees. So we can see name and employees. So this is a way of looping through objects. And we can also do some modifications like this. So let's say this is company. So now what I want to do here is for each key in the company object, I want to concatenate it with a full column and now here I want to access the value of that particular key in my company object using object notation. I already explained this earlier. So now we can see that the value of the key name. So looping through, we have key name, and the value of name is what? Tech Hub. And the second key is what? Employees. And the value of employees is what? Is another object. That's why it just shows us as object. Because this is another object inside of this. So this is how to loop through. This is how to loop through. I've added it to our notes already. So this is basically how to iterate over object properties. So now there are some methods that we can do on objects. So object methods and properties. So there's something called, so we can basically do object.keys. Object.keys is a method that we can apply on objects. I want us to be fast so we can finish this today at least. So what this simply does is, so now with object.keys, object is a JavaScript constructor. It's defined in JavaScript. We can basically access the keys of our person object. Now what this basically does is this returns to us a list of, or an array of all of the keys in this person object. Let me call these keys. Oh, no need. Let's just console this. Console.log. So we can see this returns to us an array of all of the keys in our person object, because we are deleting some of the things here. It's not bringing it in full. So now we can see with our first name, last name, age, full name, and gender. So the way we have object.keys, we also have object.values, which returns, this is our last one for the day, object.values, which returns an array of all of the values in our person object. And when we do object.values, so basically what you do is to access the object constructor, define the capital object, use the JavaScript keyword, values, and pass your object into it. And this returns an array of all of the values. So now we have all of the values there are chisimd, which we defined here. I think that should be the first name, the last name, the age, the function, which is this function full name here, and the gender male. So that's object.values, and that's all for, there are some more, but that's all for object methods and properties. Next class we'll be touching on something called we're touching on object-oriented programming. So please, if you don't understand what we've done today, you are free to ask questions now before we go into more complicated things next week. Any questions? Let's close here for today. Next week we'll be starting with object-oriented programming. Any question? Is there anything you don't understand that you need me to go over? Are we still together?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions? Is there anything you don't understand that you need me to go over? I believe that means everybody understood everything we've done today.
The only place I'm having this inconvenience is that constructor and the instance. So, but I will go and do more research on that. Maybe before next week.
Let's see if we can do this. Okay, what's the, I think let me understand where you don't understand, so I can know how to explain what you don't understand. So what part exactly is not clear?
Like both that constructor and instance.
Do you know when we start object-oriented programming, we'll be we'll be using constructors a lot. So I need to make sure you guys understand what constructors are as much as possible. Let me see if I can get something that explains it here better than I have done. Constructor functions in JavaScript. A constructor is a special function that creates and initializes an object instance of a class. In JavaScript, a constructor gets called when an object is created using the new. Can we read this together? Let's see if and just tell me if you understand what this statement means. Can we read it together? Can someone just unmute and read it out? So, and let's see if you understand what the statement means. But this is basically what I explained with what the constructor is. Can someone just unmute and read this? Are we still together? Let someone unmute and read this. Okay.
We are still together, sir.
A constructor is a special function that creates and initializes an object instance of a class.
Okay. Continue. Read to the end.
In JavaScript, a constructor gets called when an object is called using the new keyword.
Okay.
So the purpose of a constructor is to create a new object and set values for any existing object properties.
Do you understand what you just read? Is it clear? Is it clear? What part is confusing so I can explain what part you don't understand from what you just read? Let's do it like that.
I understand, sir. I got.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who said you understand? Steven, right?
Yeah, the instance that is where I understand, bro. But the constructor, I don't really get it yet.
But you know what the instance is?
Yes, sir.
The instance is simply what you get when you call your constructor with a new keyword. That is what the instance is. So, for example, because when I call, where is that guy again? When I call person with this new keyword, I get a Rukayat instance. I get an instance that I called Rukayat. So now this is an instance of this person constructor because I called it with a new keyword. And now what is this person constructor? This person constructor is an object that contains certain properties or methods. I think the best thing would be I think the best thing we can do is I'm going to send us links to MDN docs. So whatever part is not clear, you can read it there. I would also see if I can get materials that explain this thing in simpler ways that we might understand if this seems confusing. Okay. Constructor versus object literal. Okay, let's see this. Let's just see this. Just look at this from the top. Can you see this function? Can someone unmute so this can be interactive? Can you see this function?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This function user. This function user is an object that has what? That has a value, a key value, a value with name, and the value, a key with name, and the value is Bob. Now, this is a constructor. What we've defined here is a constructor that simply has the key name and the value Bob. And I explain what this is. This basically references the context of this object. So now this name is available within the context of this object. Now this is a constructor. This user one is an instance of this user constructor. How is it an instance of this user constructor? Because we called the user constructor with a new keyword. So we simply say new user basically gives us a new user that we call user one. And each user one is a new instance of let's do it like this. It's like having a father and a mother, a father and a mother and a child. Now, the child is so now let's just say the child is an instance of their father their father and their mother. Why? Because the child will have all the properties. This is hypothetically speaking. So now let's now assume we call that child with the new keyword. So we say, let's say we call the parents, or the parent with, let's do this. Let me type this for us. I think this will make it clearer. So let's say we have a function parents. Let's say the parent is what? The parents name Bob and Jane. So now this instance is basically a copy. I don't want to call it child because child might be confusing, but just say a copy, a copy of this particular parent constructor. Now, why is that? So let's say the parents have blue eyes. The parents are short. Let's say the height of the parents are short. Let's say the parents are short. Skin color. Let's say the skin color of the parents is what? Is dark. So now this instance is a copy of this parent. Now, what this instance we have is, this instance will have all the properties of this parent. So this instance we have a eye of color blue. This instance, which is the child, will also be short. This instance will also be short, and this instance will also have a skin color that is dark. So now this child is basically an instance of their parents, because they have because they are called with the new keyword. They basically inherit all the properties of their parents, and they are basically a copy of this parent. So that's why you see some people where they say the child looks like the father. So let's now assume. So that just means, let's just say now that child is basically an instance of their father, because they have all the properties of the father. And let's say the father is now, in this case, the constructor. I don't know if it's clearer a little bit.
Yeah, it's better now. It's clear now.
It's better now, Abby.
Yeah, I get it now. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other question? Any other question? I think I like this link. I can send it to us. They explain some things really well here. Any other questions?
Sir,
Yep.
can you add other properties to a constructor that is not in the parent? Sorry, can you add a new property to an instance that is not in the constructor?
A new property to an instance that is
No.
not in the
A new property to an instance that is not in the constructor. For instance, maybe like this dots, maybe religion or tribe to the instance,
Okay.
and it's not in the parent.
Let's look at it together. Let's see if we can add it. Height dots. So that, let's say child dots I color school. School is let's say school is University of Abuja. So now if we console.log child, what do you think we are going to have? Let's look at it together. Did I just answer your question? Okay.
Sir, yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Any other question? Okay, if that's all, thank you guys. See you next week. Oh, let me send this. I'll send the notes to you guys. All right, thank you guys. Thank you. Aguda Blessing. Is this your first time in the class? Can you unmute? I think I've seen your name like once or twice, but you've not been consistent. This is not your first time. I know I've seen you once or twice, but you've not been consistent. How do we meet? Stop the recording now. Oh, you're in a noisy place. Okay. All right, guys. See you later. See you next week. Thank you.